Hi, thanks for watching. This is a demonstration of setting up two virtual servers on one tiny PC. Each virtual machine gets its own distinct IP address and fully qualified domain name. You can use this process to isolate services from each other and run multiple services on the same default or on the default ports on the same physical machine. I have tried to do the same services on LXD, which is a more lightweight solution. Some of the services I want to use are snaps, which those specific snaps do not perform well in containers. This demonstration is with Ubuntu Server 20.04. Other distributions should be a very similar process with slight differences. Okay. So before you begin, you must disable AMT if you have an Intel CPU by entering the Management Engine BIOS extensions by hitting Control-P on post. If you just do a disable in BIOS, it may only reset to default settings. You need a direct internet connection available, but during the install process, you want the admin workstation and server on the same secure NAT so that they can see each other and the internet, but the internet cannot see them. You want an ISP that hands out enough IP addresses for the virtual machines plus one. You need one IP for the host so that you don't have to secure shell secure shell open on the same IP address as your internet services. Sadly, our ISP at work only supports 2 per customer without paying a lot of money. It is still a good solution for internal services, or if you can just set up services on alternate ports if you are just sending link or it's internal company for only your own reference or whatever. You need enough registered fully qualified domain names for the virtual machines plus one. You do need one for the host so that you can find it. Fortunately, free DNS services typically allow 3. You need to have KVM support in the CPU. Most desktop CPUs would work. You can check that with KVM OK command in your shell from the live Linux installer. It should either work or tell you to install a package to see if it works. You also need to have virtualization enabled in the BIOS. Many manufacturers of desktop and laptop systems will turn it off by default. You need enough RAM for your workload and enough disk space for your data, preferably solid state drive. What is enough totally depends on what you're doing. Same thing goes for your internet speed. It has to be fast enough for what you're doing. What is fast enough depends on what you're doing and how many users. If you're using the free IP or the free DNS service noip.com, you want to precompile their binary because we don't want to have to install any compilers on these machines or virtual machines. And you need an admin workstation with Secure Shell and X11. Any Linux or BSD should have that by default. Mac probably would work with Xcorts. You need some X11 implementation on Windows and a Secure Shell client, which should work. I haven't tried it, or at least not in about a decade. So I'm using the Ubuntu 20.04 downloaded April 23rd, 2020, which was release date. For illustration, I've enabled Secure Shell in the installer and Secure Shelled in. If you want to Secure Shell into the installer, you need to have a DHCP reservation by MAC address only. This did work properly in the April 20th beta and in 19.10 version, but for some reason they've turned on client ID in the DHCP client, and after confirming the network settings, the installer will set the client ID and refresh DHCP, which gives it a different address, cutting off your Secure Shell session. If you Secure Shell in again, it starts from the beginning, and when you confirm the network address or the network settings, it will set a different client ID and release and renew DHCP again, giving it another IP address. So make a DHCP reservation by MAC address only if you want to Secure Shell in Hopefully soon there will be an updated version of the install stick image that does not do that. Our demonstration system is a Lenovo M93 Tiny. That is old. It has a Core i5-4570T, which is a 2-core, 4-thread model, which is just enough for what we're doing. It has 8 gigs RAM, which is, again, just enough, and 120 gig solid-state drive, which is old and slow, but much faster than a rest hard drive. The process overview, we're going to install server 20.04, set it up with LVM with a logical volume for swap and a logical volume for the host. We're going to turn on Secure Shell and not install any of the presented software. Then we're going to remote in and install transfer utility and ZRAM and set up our Secure Shell public key and lock down Secure Shell, and then configure the DNS updater, install Virt Manager, and then we're going to have to create 2 VMs. I did on 19.10 and the 20.04 beta installer from April 20th. That worked to create 1 VM and then just clone it. For some reason, the same issue as we have in the installer, they've turned on client ID. And when you clone them, they have the same client ID, so they get the same IP address, even though they have different MAC addresses. So we have to create 2 different VMs until they decide that turning on client ID was a bad idea. So we create both VMs and configure them and set them up so we can get in Serial Console, and then configure them to run after boot and set them up, install our software, shut her down, plug it into the internet, Bob's your uncle. So we begin our install. So on the installer, I'm choosing English because that's my language. You can choose whatever language you want. I choose the default keyboard because that's what I have. And I accept the network settings. We're using DHCP version 4. Because we want to be able to just plug it into a different ISP and have it just grab whatever address it's given. No proxy, because I don't need a proxy. The closest mirror is automatically selected. It's actually not the closest mirror, but we're going to go with that. The Ubuntu Canada archive mirror is in Ontario. I'm in BC. But for brevity, I'll go like that. So we just, on the drive setup, we want to use the entire disk, but set it up as LVM. It looks like we're done. It tells us that we're done at this stage, but the next screen, when we jump to it, actually lets us customize the disk layout. So it's already set up the LVM group with a BIOS grub and boot partition, which it needs. But the root partition, it sets up only 4 gigs. I assume that they think that you're going to add separate ones for var and home, etc. We're just going to use a single partition for root, but we need it to have a useful name. And 16 gigs so that it has enough space. And also for this use, I prefer BTRFS. And there we go. Bam. Then we want to go in and create a new logical volume. We want to call it swap. Also 16 gigs. Set it up for swap. You want to turn on swap because once the VM software starts, you want it to be able to swap out things that are only used during boot and on the virtual machines and the host, so that it can save that RAM for actual things that are being used. So all we've done is resize the root partition and create a swap partition, change it to BTRFS, and give it a useful name. so that we don't have non-meaningful names in our LVM pool later. Done. Continue. We need a name or a username. Machine name, username, and password. You have to make the match, type correctly. And we do want to install Ubuntu Secure Shell Server, otherwise we won't be able to get in from the admin workstation again. Sadly, import Secure Shell Identity only gives you the option of GitHub and Launchpad. I really wish that there was a wget option so I could have it on a local server, but it doesn't have it. So no, we got to do that manually. At this stage, we want to skip all of these snaps. And it's installing. I'm going to pause the screen. Remember to watch the clock in the lower right-hand corner to see how long. Hi, welcome back. It is done. I hit enter on reboot. I got to switch my screen to the other screen. Wait for it to tell me to remove the installation medium. Do so. And hit enter on the other keyboard. Now, if you watch the other screen, you can't see it on your side, of course, but we have the boot on the other screen takes a little bit longer the first time because it's creating RSA keys and stuff. I'm going to pause the video and restart. All right, looks like it's ready. The other screen shows at this stage reached target cloud init. And that from previous experience tells me that it is ready. So we need to remove the entry for that host from our known hosts file. Otherwise you won't be able to secure shell in. It will tell you that that host is not who you think it is. And then we can secure shell in as our new user that we just set up. And put in the password. Now, we're going to do an apt update. And make sure the system is up to date. So we're going to install LRZSZ, and we're also going to install ZRAM tools and ZRAM config. LRZSZ is a utility for transferring files via any terminal. I'm using that because I want to use the same utility for transferring stuff onto the host as I do onto the guests or virtual machines, which I will be setting up as a serial console access only. And I could use secure shell onto the host, or secure copy onto the host, but if I already have a secure shell terminal open, it's easier to just type RZ and spit my files onto the machine through the console. So, and So ZRAM is a super handy utility, or not utility, but configuration setting that enables a zip compressed swap cache, which basically trades a little bit of RAM and a little bit of CPU time for much less disk access on your drive that's doing swap. And the benefit of that, if you're running hard drives, is that your swap is very, very much faster. And if you are running a solid state drive, you have much fewer writes, which prolongs the lifetime of your solid state drive if you're hitting swap. If you're never hitting swap, then it doesn't make any difference. So we've got our transfer utility set up, and now we need to install our secure shell public key. We need to make a directory.ssh, cd into it, and upload our idrsa.pub. You don't want to do the not.pub one. Transfer complete. And we are going to rename that idrsa to authorized keys. And then we are going to set up directory access permissions so that only this user can see this directory, and only this user can see the authorized keys file. Secure Shell won't let you use the authorized key file unless it is only visible and only writable by that user for security reasons that hopefully are obvious. Now we're going to reconfigure Secure Shell daemon. Going to move the port and we are also going to disable password access or password authentication. Now, if I did everything right, I restart this and try and Secure Shell back in on the default port. Connection refused. But if I put -P 2223, so we're putting an alternate port so that people don't, our script kiddies don't get in on the default port. Makes it slightly harder for them. You notice this time I didn't need to put my password. That's because it's now using the authorized keys file. So we're going to lock down the firewall so that only Secure Shell is allowed. You have to be root to do that. You also have to type your password correctly. And enable uncomplicated firewall. And we verify we can get back in. Yay! So now we're going to upload our precompiled dynamic DNS uploader or updater, and we're going to configure it and set it to run on boot, on reboot, and 15 minutes after every hour. So we're going to upload my precompiled binary. Untarball it. And we're going to move it into where it belongs. And that's wrong. And we're gonna copy that guy. That's copied, so cool. It's owned by root. No, we don't want all updated. No, we don't want to update our chat or docs DNS entries. And yes, we want to update the host one. Update interval is default. All right. And now we've got to configure it to run on boot. We want to start a root shell before we do crontab -e. I don't know why it doesn't seem to work if you don't do it that way. I think it's editing the user's one, but as root or something. But I found it gave me trouble. Or maybe I just did something wrong when I tried it that way. So as soon as the system boots, we want to do user local bin no IP2. And 15 minutes every hour, every day, every month, every hour, every day, every month, every day of the week. We want to do user local. You can use any value for that first one, between 0 and 59. That'll be like 15 minutes after the hour in this example. But if you want to make sure that it's a random time, it's just hourly, not on the 15 minutes. To run it again in case your IP has changed, so you don't have too long of a time of the site services being down, which is a risk you run when doing things with dynamic DNS. With dynamic DNS and DHCP, your ISP can change your IP address anytime. And if they do that, then your services may be down for, in this case, up to an hour. But unless they go out of their way to annoy you, that doesn't actually happen very often. So I'm going to upload wait for that motorcycle to go by. I'm going to upload the Ubuntu installer ISO. So this one I have it's a second download. The first one was the one that was released on the 20th. This is the actual release one. Takes a little while to upload. Transfer is complete. Now, if you note so I'm going to install Virt Manager. I'm going to do that by uploading a script. You can see the contents of it there. And it has to be run as root because it's going to do an apt-get install and some group mods and stuff. And that's going to take a while. All right, Virt Manager is installed. Now, if you noticed, when I've been secure shelling into this box, I have the -X in my secure shell command. That allows X11 graphical applications to run on the server and display on my workstation, which is super handy. Because things like Virt Manager are GUI applications. So now we have Virtual Machine Manager, and we can create a new virtual machine. Grab the, I don't know why you have to go browse local for this part, but there you go. ISO file. It automatically detects that it's the latest LTS. We only need to allocate 2 gigs for this. Now here, don't create a disk in here. That will put it in the default location, which is just the root file system. We want to go select create custom storage, hit manage, and here on this left-hand side are the storage pools. So we want to create a new pool and select the type, drop down, and set it to LVM volume group, and that is going to default to the same volume group that our root and swap file systems are in. You can, if you have more than one, you can do more than one. But like if you're doing multiple drives in the system, you can do that. I didn't, so click finish. Select that. See, when you go selecting that pool now, you can see the root and swap, or the host root and swap volume logical volumes are already there. Don't select those. We want to click this guy to create a new volume. We want to give it a useful name of chatserv in this case, and set a capacity. We have 86 gigs free. My chatserv is in my testing that I was doing was only Jitsi, so 20 gigs is enough. And then choose volume. Click forward. So we want to select customize before install. We want to give it a useful name because I don't know why it always chooses the detected OS name, but it needs to be something that you'll recognize so you know which server you're talking about. In the network selection drop down, we want to select NAT. If we do NAT, then the guest server won't appear on the internet. You'll need to do port forwarding, which is beyond the scope of this demo. So we're going to go MAC VTAP and leave the source mode as default, which is bridge, which is what we want. Basically, that gives the virtual machine its own MAC address on the network, as if the host and each virtual machine were plugged into a switch that is the jack on the back of the machine. So we click Finish, go into Boot Options, Start Virtual Machine on Host Boot Up, and as we want to apply, Display Spice we can set to no listen. Sound we can remove, and tablet we can remove, and video we can set to VertIO. I'll move that guy around, and we're gonna do another one. A game with 2 gigs. And we're going to create a new volume. DocServe. And we're going to give this one 60 gigs. Okay, so these windows, you want to go down to View and resize to VM, because otherwise you won't be able to see the entire installer. So this is the chat server. You can see on the top of the screen, on the top of the window, which one you're connected to. You're stepping through. It grabs a new IP address. Done. No proxy. Local mirror. I'm just going to select Use Entire Disk here. Done. Done. Continue. We don't want to install Open Secure Shell. Done. And on this one, we're not installing any software. Done. While that runs, we go over here. Go View, resize to VM, English. Done. New IP address. No proxy, mirror. Use entire disk. Done. Done. Continue. Server name. DocServe. No secure shell. Done. So this guy, Nextcloud. So the latest stable Nextcloud is version 18, and it is super cool. So we're going to install that so I can show it how to do that. Now they're both installing at the same time. and we can go back to the VM manager and see the CPU usage on both of them. I think that you can't see the other graphs without being root. Now this is the same as the host shows on this boot up, so you can see how long it takes to boot up, what the screen looks like. So it looks like it's ready at this stage, but it's actually not. It still has to run through a little bit more. It only does this part on the first boot. Otherwise, when the login prompt appears, it's ready. So when it hits the first boot, when it hits reach target cloud init target, it's ready to go. So you just hit enter again, and you can log in. So now, on each of these, we gotta enable the serial console. So I'm going to do sudo su just so I don't have to type sudo over and over and over again. And we're going to start serial getting and enable serial getting. Cool. And we're going to close this. That doesn't shut off the machine. As you can see here, it's still running. This one's ready to go. Hit reboot. Hit enter. It actually automatically ejects the installation ISO. Still not ready. Jumping the gun a bit. Looks like it might be ready. Not sudo. Apparently it wasn't ready. I'm gonna log in anyways. Because those things don't actually need to be running for the... Oh yeah, it's taking longer because it's starting Nextcloud, which is going to generate more encryption keys. So it reached cloud init target. This one I also have to enable serial console. Sadly, you can't paste into the virtual machine view, which is why we're starting serial console, so that we can console in from the host secure shell session and not a graphical picture of the screen. No, serial Getty, not serial console. A Getty is just a program that runs on a console device and waits for a login. You can close that one. Got 2 running, so you can have 2 tabs open. Converge, console, chat server, spell console correctly. You can log in there. We can console there. Just getting both systems up to date, except that I think I typed the password wrong. Now this one we don't need to install ZRAM because it's on the host. Just LRZSZ. Same here. Now you can see that the screen's a bit monkeyed up, and that's because my console window here is many lines, and the serial console thinks that it's only 24 lines long, which is annoying, but there you go. So if I do a clear before I enter any editor, then it'll be fine. For some reason, if you do one RZ right after the other, it doesn't pop up the window in console. That's okay, I can do it through the menu. I'm not narrating this because it's exactly the same on the hosts. I'm just selecting a different entry to update. Now the doc-serve has, you'll notice, has Nextcloud on it. I want to pull up the IP address and see what it is, and then I'm going to go to in a browser to that port and configure the default password so that no one else does. Because if you just put it on the internet, someone can, if they see it online, there's a small possibility someone might jump on it before you do. You do not want that. Okay, so pull up your browser. And 3.0. Bam, create admin account. Now we want, in this case, we want to leave checked the install recommended apps, which is going to install Calendar, Contacts, Talk, Mail, and OnlyOffice. The use case that I had set this up for, where I was testing it, I was wanting to have, instead of using Talk, I wanted to use Jitsi to allow many more users to connect without overwhelming the server. For some cases, like it would be used, if you used Nextcloud Talk, all of the connections go through this server, which is fine for a handful of people. I was testing this for a society that wanted to do an online, or that was considering doing an online general meeting because of the COVID-19 lockdowns. They're not able to meet in person, and it is getting close to time for their annual general meeting. So that means having a couple hundred people on the conference at the same time. Jitsi is a better solution for that use case if you have low bandwidth and low server resources, because the connections go between every caller instead of going only the setup goes through the server, and with Nextcloud Talk, all the bandwidth goes through the server. But the super cool thing about Nextcloud 18 is that it has OnlyOffice installed, which is super cool because it includes the OnlyOffice server, whereas the previous version, if you installed the OnlyOffice Nextcloud plugin, it was just a connector. This installs the OnlyOffice plugin and community server, so that you can have, so that you don't need to go through an extra step to install OnlyOffice. and configure it on a different host again. It can be on the same host, automatically installed. And I'm going to pause. Oh, here we go. So you can see this list. I'm going to pop this guy back up on the screen so that you can watch the clock, boring as it is. So you can see when this updates. So you can watch the clock, because I'm going to pause the video. So the Nextcloud install is completed, and it runs you through this. This is the admin user I've got set up here. Runs you through this screen slideshow thing when you first set up. And the apps are super handy. And the cool thing, you can now add spreadsheets or Word type documents in OnlyOffice. And you can do co-editing and do a chat as well. And you can share through Nextcloud Talk if you're having only a handful of people edit the document. In my use case, this was that I was testing this for. I was wanting the society to be able to do a meeting agenda and have it viewed by multiple people and edited only by the secretary live while they are doing a Jitsi broadcast of their meeting. So people could see what motions were made, and they could do a live agenda that multiple people could see. And this pretty much concludes the demonstration. This box is now ready to put out on the internet. You would want it immediately after plugging it into the internet. If you're using Nextcloud, you would want to set up, once it's on the internet and has its own domain name updated that points to that box, you want to run the Nextcloud Let's Encrypt setup, which is beyond the scope of this demo. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully it is useful.